I do like that analogy.
I think you
Yeah.
said it one time.
Yeah.
But it's like everybody was racing
Yeah.
for the cure.
Yeah,
And it wasn't a marathon,
yeah, yeah.
so to speak. Okay, we're
Okay.
rolling.
Most people are familiar with the space race in the late 50s and the 1960s. And during the Cold War, it was believed that those who conquered space would be the leaders of the world, that they would be the dominant influence in the world. And of course, the two major players were the Soviet Union and the United States. And so the American people were inspired to be the first to land on the moon. And this was a race between the Soviets and the Americans. The Soviets started out ahead, but through Kennedy's inspiration, America caught up and they passed the Soviets. And indeed, in June of 1969, Neil Armstrong was the first man to step on the moon and planted the American flag. That spirit was also seen in cancer discovery. And in the late 60s, there were studies that were ongoing at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York and MD Anderson in Houston, studying drugs like actinomycin D and methotrexate and vinblastine and chlorambucil. And when Dr. Einhorn arrived at Indiana University to begin to conquer the testicular cancer problem, Indiana University was behind. Certainly Memorial Sloan Kettering and MD Anderson had had years of developing their own regimens. But Indiana caught up, and Memorial Sloan Kettering continued to develop their regimens, and they were very successful at combining different drugs and finding better outcomes for their patients. MD Anderson continued to develop their regimen of escalating doses of bleomycin and vinblastine. And of course, Dr. Einhorn took a different approach, and that was the first to add cisplatin to the regimen. And Dr. Einhorn was the first to land on the moon, so to speak. It was his regimen which was the true breakthrough in the 1970s. And that regimen became the worldwide standard of care. And then developments at Memorial and elsewhere built off that fundamental idea.
So did Larry and IU,
The only
world?
You know, the only problem with that analogy, it suggests that Memorial and MD Anderson were the Soviet Union, and I don't mean to imply that. But it really was, they were doing their thing, and Larry really was the inspiration here, and he was the first. And, you know, there's a real genius in being the first. There's a courage in being the first. There's an uncertainty in being the first. And it truly was the breakthrough. And you know, that wasn't the final success. That was a single study. The patients would get a year of therapy. We didn't have good antiemetics. Dr. Einhorn perfected that regimen, cut the number of cycles of therapy, got rid of the use of maintenance therapy, eventually got rid of the drug of vinblastine, added a etoposide instead, did randomized trials, assessed different doses and schedules of the regimen, fine-tuned it, understood who should get how much therapy in what setting. I mean, the story does not end in 1977 or 1979. That was just the first foundational moment. The fine-tuning and the perfection of it took another 2 decades. And the treatment of patients with relapse disease continues to be perfected to this day. So this is a 4-decade-long journey and not a single discovery.
All right.
All
That's a
right.
wrap.
Well, thank you guys.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
That was just a tremendous.
Thanks for asking. Very good.